Okay, so this whole thing got started because a few weeks back, I built a couple of these. They're dovetailed ends and the knob that unscrews. So you can replace the paper towels. And so the question is, how do you make threads? And how do you make a nut? So there are lots of, yeah, we'll get rid of that. Okay, there are lots of different ways that have been used traditionally.
Hey, Ken, can I interrupt for a second? You have a light. You have a light on that's sort of blaring out, washing everything out.
Oh, let's see.
It's the sun.
Hang on, I'll fix that.
Ah, much better. Well,
You can slide it up between the wall and the light. Oh, that'll work. No, there's a board in the middle there. Yeah.
you have one more of those?
Yeah, we're getting one up.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. No, when we tested this, it was in the middle of the day, and we get western sun in the window, and that's bad news. Stick it between the wall and the light.
Try that.
Should be able to go up right here. There we go. Okay, is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. So, a couple of things I want to show is I started collecting tools a lot of years ago, and this is one of the tools that I got, and you'll notice it's threaded, handmade threaded screws in a thing to come up with a clamp. So I ended up with 3 of these from an antique store way back when I was first collecting tools. So there just shows you what you can do with the threading. So some of the other things that in the old days they've used are the clamps were made this way. That on the screw clamps that you buy now, they're threaded in 2 directions with the metal ones. These are both threaded with the right-hand threads. So they're threaded in a normal manner. They're not threaded in any unique way. The bottom one unscrews and just pushes in a hole in here. And the top one is threaded in the other cheek and slides through this hole. So those give you some ideas of some of the different things that you can do with threaded things and have been done in the past. So these screws, this is the clamp one of the first clamps I used in the 70s after I bought it, the first one of this kind of clamp that I did. And I used to use it quite a lot. It works really well. So how are those made? Well, you need a thread box, okay, which is got a hole on the infeed side that matches the diameter of the piece of wood you're going to use to cut the threads on. And on the outfeed side, it's threaded. And down inside the box, there's a cutter. And I'll take one apart and show you a cutter when we get to the next stage. And the threads on the old ones were a hollow tube with a hole drilled through it. And there are 2 cutters that cut the threads on either side of the cutter. And these are screwed This is screwed into the block with a great deal of force in an oiled surface. So you drill out a pilot hole, and this tap calls for a 3/4 inch pilot. That's the diameter of this piece, but a 3/4 inch hole is very tight fit on this. So trying to cut these threads in this walnut block was a hell of a lot of work because it's very hard to get past the friction in the front. But you can see it stained, and that's from the oil that I put on it. I happen to have a little jar that I keep walnut oil in. And so I just brushed walnut oil in the hole and cut the threads. So that's basically the old-fashioned way to do it. But the first thing you need is dowel. So how do you take a regular stick and turn it into a dowel? Well, you can make a cutter like this, which has a 3/4 inch hole bored through it, down inside, and I don't know if this is going to show very well. A little bit, maybe you can see the reflection on the inside of this, but there's a blade in here that's set just right on a couple of compound angles so that it'll cut at the dowel, and you stick it over top of the dowel, and you just and as you can tell, there's a bit of friction, but it's actually not very hard to do. And I just cut another inch on the dowel. Okay, so this is something that I made. There's commercial versions of this that are available, and I just recently purchased on eBay a Stanley number 77 dowel maker, which has a whole series of different cutters you can put on it to make anything from 1/4 inch to 1.5 inch dowel out of square stock. And you just turn a crank and push the stick into the cutter. So we'll have one of those to play with sometime in the future. So how do you do this? Well, if you want to bore a hole for a 1 inch threaded hole, you need this is for a 3/4 inch hole. You need 3/4 inch threads. You need a 5/8 inch tap. And so your tap just gives you the clearance hole at the front of the thing, and it's a nice tight fit. And so here's a whole series of holes that I drilled out in this to show you how this works. So we'll get the oil out. Oil up the hole. And you got it, okay. And then we stick the cutter in and we just turn. And when you get it all the way through, you can either back it out or run it all the way through. Backing it out makes the threads cleaner. Now this is from a more modern set that I bought from years ago. Comes with a tap, and we cut the tap, and they also come with not only with through chaps, but have a leading point, But that won't, if you're tapping a blind hole, the bottom ½ inch of this won't cut a thread. So you need a bottoming tap, which has threads all the way to the end. So you cut the hole, you thread the hole, a blind hole with this, and then finish with a bottoming tap. And these guys were invented by a guy named Conover back in the 70s. And they're very nicely made. And I wanted to open one up and show you what the cutter's like. That'll work. It won't work. Oh yeah. If you're on speaker view, we'll be better. Once you can turn gallery off for me if you want. Okay, when you open this up, oops, that didn't work. So on these thread cutters, the in-feed side has to match the dowel size, and it has to be a fairly good tight fit because it's going to go into a cutter. What I wanted to show you is on these blocks, you can take the input block off of the cutter, and I can show you what the cutter looks like.
When did these kind of tools first come available?
The antique ones have been available off and on, but they're really hard to find a match pair or ones that work right. This thread box needs some repair because this hole's too big. This is about 1 inch and 3/16 in-feed hole and 1 inch output hole. So it's not a very practical thing to do.
But are these from like the 1800s or what's the
they go back farther than that. They probably went back to the 1700s. Okay, here we go. Just to show you how. So once you open this up, you'll see there's a cutter right here, and I don't think you can see it, but it's a V-shaped cutter, but the end of it's down here. It has to be set so the bottom of the cutter is right at the top of the thread, so that it cuts exactly in the right place to get the clearance. So when it cuts the thread, it's working right. So that the threads in the aluminum part in the center have to match up with the bottom of the cutter. And so once you get this cutter set and you tighten up the nut here that holds the cutter in place, then the whole thing is pretty well easy to do in terms of the adjustment. Yeah, oh, there you go. Okay, there you can see the cutter.
How easy is it to sharpen the cutter?
What'd you say, Roger?
How easy is it to sharpen the cutter?
Actually, on the new ones, it's not too hard. You need a V-shaped, 60-degree V-shaped slipstone, and you just use a slipstone. And you don't have to sharpen them a lot. That's the nice thing about them if you buy a new one. If you're dealing with these old guys, it's a pain in the neck to sharpen them. They're just very difficult. So this thing is really easy because it has these 2 index pins that line up this block exactly right. So once you get everything done, these guys are really a precise tool and they're well made. Now, Conover is no longer in business. He made several things that were really innovative. In the 70s, he made a lathe, which I'm sure Roger's familiar with, the Conover lathe. It was a cast iron end pieces and used great big wooden beams for waves. So you could buy the cast iron from him and the drive head, and those parts that moved on the waves, and then you just went and got yourself a 4x12 or a couple of 4x12s, and those were your waves for your lathe. You could make it any length you had lumber for. Anyway, so he started selling these, and that's where I bought mine. And I have 3 of them. I have a 3/4, a 1/2, and a 1 inch. And I have the both bottom and regular taps for all of these. Some people sell them only with the through tap. You can buy the Woodcraft ones at the Woodcraft store in Beaverton, I think, has a few of them. But they sell these things. They'll look the same, but they only come with a through tap. If you want the bottoming tap and the through tap and a better price, you can go to Highland Hardware in Atlanta or get them off the web, and they sell them for a little lower price, but they come with both the taps. And they're also available from Garrett Wade and one other place. Oh, Grizzly also sells them, but they only come with 1 tap at Grizzly. In order to do, what was that?
But how much are they?
They range from $50 for a 1/2 inch set to $68 for an 1.5 inch set.
Hmm.
And they have them in 1/4 inch increments. The other thing you need, if you're going to do it, is some really good drills to drill the pilot holes for your thing. It takes a 5/8 bit to do a 3/4 inch dowel. So here's a dowel that I made with this gizmo, but I happened to do this without turning. I wanted to see if my lathe would work. So I stuck the piece of wood in a chuck on the lathe and stuck the dowel cutter over the end and just held it and ran it through as the thing was turning at slow speed. It was a very effective way to cut a dowel and very quick. So then they're easy to make a turn from. So just show you how this one works. So we just cut this guy a minute ago. So, and all you do is press to get started. And once you get going, and the thing is pushing itself on the threads, they cut beautifully. So your first 1/4 inch is oftentimes buggered up.
Looks good.
Anyway, so how well does it work? So the biggest trick with all these things in thread cutting is to get the cutter done correctly. And so you get the cutter set, make a test, adjust the cutter, make a test until you get a nice clean thread with a flat top, slightly flat top. So any questions so far?
In your experience, Ken, are there any particular woods that you like making threads and nuts with, or anything work?
Well, I've got all kinds of stuff that I've got here. I've got pieces of cherry dowel that I've made. This one is some kind of maple. Here's an oak dowel. We can see how that cuts.
Sounds like it's pretty much anything that has enough density.
I think this one is probably just a little too oversized. But there's some nice clean threads in oak. So you can use almost anything you want, and that's not too difficultly hard to cut. You find out pretty quickly once you try a dowel, you'll either know in the first half inch whether or not it'll work, or you have to find a different wood. So you can play around and do all kinds of things. I also wanted to show you another way you could do this. This is a rig that sold by the Beal Threading Company. They are one of the places you can buy threading tools from now. And what you do to use this guy, there's a little cutter with a 60-degree V in it that you center with the router. You stick your dowel in a holder so that you can hang on to it. You stick it in the hole, turn the router on, and you just turn the crank. And it cuts the dowels as fast as you can go. I mean, and it does a really beautiful job. The particular set that I bought from the 80s, they have, this is what they're
We're losing your audio, Ken.
sorry about that. Okay. So this device uses these inserts, which have the threads cut in the back of them, and they are all set up so that they go into the jig. You have a little collar which you drop into the top of the jig in a hole, this index hole, and that's what you use to line up the bit so that you get the router in exactly the right position. And there's a different one of these for all the different sizes they come in. They come in about 4 or 5 sizes now. It happened when I bought this. They made both right-handed and left-handed threads. The left-handed ones were oriented to the right. So you ended up with a whole of taps for all the different sizes. And these taps that Beal makes are 4-fluted, and they look more like a machine tap, only they're 6 teeth per inch. They work the taps work really, really well. They're the nicest taps that I've used. They come in both right hand and left hand, and they have bottoming taps in the whole 9 yards. Beal now makes a set of a new version of this. I happened to pick one up at one of our estate sales because I was just blown away by it. But it has a very simple arrangement. It has a stand that you can put in the vise. You mount your router up here at the same way, and then the white insert is where your threads get aligned and stuff. And you run the dowel in from this side, and crank it, and it comes out the other side. So they now make, the Beal now makes them in all the way down to, I think, under a half inch. I think and the half inch may be the smallest one they make. And they go up to 1.5 inches.
Ken, do they come with the bits?
Yes, there's a bit with it. It's one of the bits that I have is double-ended. I don't know which bit this one has with it. This one was never used by whoever bought it, and he bought it with a complete set of all of the drills for the taps. So there's some really nice drills in here. So if you're interested in doing this or buying a set, be sure you look at Beal Tools online for their stuff. Look at it and see if that's what meets your needs, or check out the ones on the Highland Hardware has the best deal and the nicest ones, I think, of the others. This is the tap handle that they suggest you can make for a Beal kit, which works great for small things. But now with their big 1.5 inch tap, they're selling these great big plumber's taps handles that are about this long and that are metal. So if you're going to buy a big one, be sure you get a big handle, because this little thing won't do much for your tap.
I have that version, and it works really well. The most critical thing is the getting the depth of the cutter exact.
Yes. You just get the cutter centered, and then you have to get it set to the right depth so that just below what you can see through the threads in the plastic insert. And then you test it and see how it comes out. And I don't think I have any of them that are cretted up as much. When we were testing it, I think I cretted up about 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch before I got the thing cutting right. You just have to keep fiddling with it.
Yeah, the thing is, if you cut them and they look really pretty with very sharp edges, that's probably the worst thing you can do, because the edges go away right away. So,
oh yeah,
you got to fine tune it. So,
yeah, because you want the tops of the threads, you want to have a little flat on them, so they don't feel sharp when you run your finger over them. And that's the right shape. It gives you enough enough space inside the other thread that you cut, so that it doesn't bind up. Any other questions?
So Ken, I joined late, but I'm curious, like what's a typical thing that you do with a threaded rod? I was thinking a Moxon vise sort of setup. What other things have you done with it?
This is a project that I thought we could do with beginning people, because it's a great way to learn hand cut dovetails. There's 4 dovetails to cut, and we could run the rod through, and you thread at both ends and then screw the nut on.
Okay.
And I just glued and screwed the nut on at one end. And you can make all kinds of handles. Yeah.
All the thread pitches pretty much the same, Ken?
What is that?
For all the different systems, are the thread pitch all kind of the same? Is everyone?
Amazingly enough, all of these are pretty much 6 teeth per inch. So yeah, the threads are pretty comparable. And the amazing thing is this one here, the old one, is a 6 teeth per inch thread, and it cuts a beautiful hole, and you can cut the dowels with the 1 inch thing here, which is what I did on this one, and this will go right in the hole that that one made. So.
About the strength of those, like for a box of plates.
Oh yeah, if you're like, this is made out of oak, this one, and it happened to be that was what I pulled out of the box when I was looking at my dowels, and this one would be strong enough to work for a Moxon vise. But I think you'd be better off with an 1.5 inch one, the really big ones for a Moxon vise if you're doing that. But to give you an example, so this was cut with this tap, and this was cut with this threader, and it fits beautifully. So,
You know, Ken, one thing I've read that I've not tried is to preserve the threads is using very, very thin CA glue.
oh yeah, you might want to do that on some woods, but you know, if you did pine, for instance, well, I'm not sure that you could even thread pine because it's so soft that it would probably, the pressure from cutting it might break it. But in a hardwood like oak, you don't need anything. They're really tough. I haven't had a lot of issues. I think this is some kind of maple, and these threads are really will take some abuse.
Put wax or
Oh, if you Land asked if you wax, will they go better? If you want the threads to slide better, if you put a little wax on them, they will less friction, then they'll work better. But they generally don't need very much, and an oil finish is all I've ever used on them.
All right.
Comments?
Yeah, making the nuts.
Huh?
it's all about making the nuts.
Oh, okay, making the nuts. One of the things that the Beal threader gives you, which is the easy to see templates over here. This is the template that the Beal people, and it allows you to lay out a nut, but it's easy enough to lay out a nut because it's a hexagon. So the radius of the hexagon, the radius of a circle that is, if you take and strike it around the circle, you'll get 6 points and you can draw a hexagon. So if you just mark a center out, draw a circle for the size of the nut you want, lay out your 6 sides on a piece of wood, then drill your hole in the center for your tap, you can end up with a nut. So that's one way to do it. I've also just made a handle and drilled it for the tap, and then tapped that round piece, a round hollow on the end of the dowel for a different one of these for paper towel holder. So.
I was just curious, do you know that bench crafted big leg vise, is that a 1.5 thread or is that even bigger than that?
Oh, that the leg vise that they're doing with
Yeah, is that a
with
huge
the wooden one. Those are from Lake Erie Tool Works, the big vise things, and those I think are 2 1/4.
Oh wow, okay, those are big.
They're quite big. Yeah, I've owned a couple wooden threaded vise stocks. So I wish I could find. I think I have one somewhere in my hidden stuff in my storeroom, but I don't know where it is. But otherwise, I would have dug one out. They work really well, and they're oftentimes those were made by hand, by laying them out doing a cylinder and then laying them out with string on the lathe and then cutting the thing with a chisel. So in the spiral, that's the way the old guys made those. How they cut unless they got a blacksmith to make them a tap, I don't know how they tap the big holes. But I've never seen tools for really
Speaking of
large.
doing it by hand, I met this woman who does little work by hand, like she'll cut the threads and then a matching cap. And it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Someone recorded this, I posted where.
Yeah. Bland has got this recorded, so we will post it somewhere out on the website so you can get to it. And anybody have any ideas for the next one? Would you like to do another one of these?
For sure.
Yeah, I thought this one was great. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
How
thanks,
about
Ken.
saw sharpening? I mean, I know you did it in I think it was the January SIG, but I missed that one. And that could be one of just sort of a
Oh,
demo
okay.
of how to sharpen saws.
This was one of my projects that I just finished. I bought the hardware from it from Texas Woodworking, Heritage Woodworking, a long time ago, but it took me about 2 years to finally get around to it. But this is a saw vise with a great thing on it. It's got leather lined jaws, and it's really quite a functional saw vise. And you just stick it in your vise on your bench and away you go.
Cool. You might need to share the plans for that, Ken.
What was that?
You might need to share the plans for that.
Oh, you can get them online, but if you want, I'll send an email out to everybody with the link to where the plans are.
Cool.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
A good newsletter article.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. And can you get the camera up at the soft till? Yeah, okay. So you see my saw till, it's up here on the wall. That was my early COVID projects, was to get that built, because I had all those saws stashed away in a big pile in one of my tool chests. And I didn't even know how many saws I have. So one of the things I discovered is if anyone out there needs a sharp handsaw, I have some for sale. I have everything from 4.5 tooth rips to some 10 or 12 tooth cross cuts. So
Cool.
anyway. But,
Hey, Ken, getting back to the threaded, how is that affected by changes in humidity?
most of them, these good quality taps and die sets have enough clearance in them that they don't usually stick up too much. I did have when I lived back east. I had some stuff that I cut in the winter time, and come summer when the humidity went up to 90% most of the time, things got a little stiff. But you could run the threaded thing through the box, the thread box again, and clean it up, and then it would probably work fine. So.
Hey, Ken, I've got a question about the Beal jig. How they talk about using a handheld or a small veneer
Right.
router.
This is a trim router. Yeah.
Trim router. Okay.
This is the little Bosch Colt. This one here.
And that's probably about as big as you want to go with those.
Oh yeah, you do not want to use a full-size router on this thing.
Okay.
You could, but it'd make it really top heavy,
Uh-huh.
and it sort of gets in the way. And you want one that's easy to adjust the height. It turns out this one is a fiddly one to adjust the height. And this router is a bit fiddly. I haven't used it that much, so I wasn't familiar with all the fine adjustments. But once I got it done, it's great because you lock everything down, so the base is locked to it once you get it centered, and then you just have to do the vertical adjustment for the thread cutting. But if you don't get it locked down enough, the turning it on and off can cause the base to move under the clips, and if that happens, your threads can be trashed almost instantaneously. So you got to make sure that the thing is tightened down. And they have a very good video on the Beal website on how to use the machine and set it up. So if you have any questions, that's the best place to go for it.
Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Larry.
Yeah.
Suggestion for future topics. We've been having project build team Zoom meetings, and we've had Flora scheduled to talk about the tool storage systems that she built for the project build team, but then she got sick, so we haven't been able to do that. Mike may have it, but the suggestion would be, if you haven't, maybe you've done it, but have a two-part thing. One, a conversation about hand tool storage systems, and then to have, because we have Zoom and cameras, to basically marry that with shop tours, to have people, like I'd like to see how Doug Drake stores his hand tools, and how everybody, you know, so you have yours, the shop has its, and there's a set of conversations about, you know, good, bad, and ugly that might help.
Yeah, there are lots of conversations we can all have about tool storage. Yeah. You can get wooden planes. It's over here. That box actually is two-sided, and it's on casters, and there's over 300 molding planes in it. I was kind of aghast when I counted them at how many I actually had. I don't know. I would guess 300 or 400 pounds. They're not light. Yeah. So Blanda's giving you a tour of the shop. My mess of stuff in the middle. Okay. And my great yellow Oneida.
What are you most proud of and least proud of?
Good question. I've I guess I'd say I like the fact that I have space to do it, and that young enough to do it, was able to build the shop. But that's sort of one of the things I'm proud of. If you're talking about projects, I think it's hard to say. I mean, I've made a few things that I really enjoyed, really liked, but not much to talk about, mostly.
No, I was thinking about your shop layout stuff.
Oh, layout? Oh, what I don't like is the fact that I've got it filled up with cardboard boxes full of shorts. That's because I have a backyard with 3 wood sheds in it full of stuff that I milled with a chainsaw. And so if somebody's ever looking for some native woods or some weird stuff, they should give me a call, because I would love to get rid of some of the stuff I have. If anybody wants to learn to do wood turning, I have a whole bunch of maple blocks that I cut that were the right size to make pepper grinders. But they're not good for much of anything but practice, because they have no figure. They're just white maple. And they're 3 by 3 by about 10 or 12. And I have a whole pile of those. But that's what happens when somebody gives you a big pile of a maple tree that the tree guys cut into firewood length logs. So you end up with a lot of short pieces of block. Any more questions?
I'm just generally curious about how you and Bland felt like the session went. This is kind of a new thing for us.
We had 20 people. I think from my point of view, I hope I got across what I wanted to get across.
Tell them we have some
You know,
technical glitches with
we-
wire now.
Yeah, we have, you know, there's some little technical things we're just learning about in terms of how to do this, but I feel like it went reasonably well.
I like the 2-camera thing. It seemed like there was an opportunity there to show things from different perspectives. That was
Yeah.
a neat trick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to have somebody like Bland who could bring 2 cameras in and put them to work.
Camera's too fuzzy.
Is this camera too fuzzy that we're looking at right now?
A little bit.
Yeah.
We need a better camera.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my impression. It's a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and apart from fuzzy, the white balance is very, very different.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And there's some,
I was working on that.
yeah, Bland was working on that as we were trying to get started, but he couldn't get the right screen up, I think. So we can take care of that in the future. Yeah, because a lot of you guys' pictures are way better than mine, but I don't have one of these really brand new cameras built into my laptop that's shooting me. It's a little guy up on a tripod that plugs in with USB at the moment. So we can get that fixed.
Yeah.
Well, good. We'll get this edited and posted on the website. I'll work with Bland on getting that done. And then I think we would have more people if we didn't have that login issue.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope we get that solved because
Yeah.
we don't want that.
Yeah, I went in and looked and it was set for authenticated users only and you had to use, and the authentication was to log into Zoom. So
Oh,
when I've done the other ones, I've set it to everybody. So
yeah,
you don't have to
yeah.
worry about that.
Yeah, as long as you got the link.
That's right. Yeah, you got to have the link, but
But yeah, you don't need a password. You don't need.
no, something to learn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Ken. That was
Thank
good.
you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.